This is the Amazing Education Podcast. Powered by the Ames Community School District, I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we are joined by Chris Snider from Drake University. We're going to have an amazing conversation specifically about what parents should know as it relates to their students on social media and conversations that they can have at home. All right, Chris Snider, thank you for being willing to do a second episode on this topic of social media. So if you didn't have a chance to listen to episode 29 of our Amazing Education Podcast, I'd encourage you to do so. This is a part 2 to that. Now, you don't necessarily need to listen to that one before this one, but it might be helpful. In that first episode, we really took an adult perspective and how social media, the current landscape of the social media, and what that looks like for businesses. But on this episode, I really think it's going to be beneficial for us to dive into more of what parents need to know and how are our students on social media. And they're living on it, right?
Yeah. So, they are constantly online, right? And that's their word. So I know there is research that asks them how often they are on social media, and their answer is we are constantly online. So they are always having their phone in their hand and always, one notification away from jumping right back into that online world. And so it's a huge part of their lives is being able to communicate with people through social media.
Is this a good thing? We can't change it. As parents, we can maybe manage it to a certain extent, but it's inevitable that, if as teenagers they want to get on social media, they're going to, and they're going to engage and be on it constantly, and probably more than what we ever realize as parents. So what do we do?
So, I think having healthy relationships in real life and online is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that there are good aspects of this. As the parent of children who are still too young to be in this world, but have maybe started asking about this world and will be there soon, it's something that I think about. Like when will they be ready? And I think that's the question: is what makes our students ready to be on social media? So the Facebook Papers articles that came out recently, right, and are still coming out, have lots of revelations in there.
Yeah.
But to me, the big one that affects young people is that Facebook in particular, and Instagram is underneath there, and I think you can probably lump all the social networks in this to a degree, put massive growth ahead of people's mental well-being.
Yeah.
And so there are things going on that our students our kids cannot handle yet. Mm-hmm. Kids need play. Kids need to, and you can play online, right? That can fit, but kids need to take risks, and they need to make mistakes, and those mistakes need to be of low consequences.
Yeah.
So they continue to learn, and then once they become adults, they don't make those mistakes. And it's fine when we do those things in the backyard with our friends and with your siblings, but when you start making those mistakes or have the potential to make those mistakes in the online world where anything can be screenshotted, that's where it starts to scare me, to think that my kid could make a misstep simply because he wasn't yet ready to handle Instagram, and that could haunt him for a long time.
Yeah. And so the other thing that came out, with those files was how detrimental it is to teens, particularly teen girls. Is it just the reality that those mistakes that need to happen? Kids need to make thousands of mistakes, thousands and thousands of mistakes over the course of years. We all do. That's how you learn. That's how you learn to socialize. That's how you learn to interact with other people. And then here, every small one has at least the potential to be amplified.
Right, and you know, and then it's not just the mistakes that are amplified. And we're scaring people off now. No one's going to want their kids on social media, but
Is that a bad thing? I don't know.
but it's not just the mistakes that are amplified, right? It's the good thing that's happening to someone else that's not happening to you that gets amplified, right? So it's the algorithms that prioritize, you know, skinny, the perfect body image, right? It's all these things that, you know, maybe that we are prepared to deal with. Like, we can handle that as adults. We've gone through enough in our life that we can get through that. And maybe we can get through it that's the other thing, is that there's been plenty of times in the last couple of years that I've just sat up at night and cannot sleep because my mind is racing about something I saw on Facebook. And I just think my kids are not ready for this, right? And so when will they be ready for this? And that's the next step to figure out, is when are your kids ready to handle this?
Yeah. You know, I've heard other people comment on this, and of course, social media plays a big role, and that's what we're talking about on this episode. But we are in this culture that just desires eyeballs, and so, you know, Facebook is a business that desires to have your eyeballs, my eyeballs, everybody on Facebook. Twitter's the same way. But there are other, you know, every tech industry in many ways is about that. And so social media plays a key role, but a lot of these things interweave with each other. It's not just necessarily social media. You know, there's the fashion industry and how they, you know, portray young women. There's the movie industry, you know, that also plays a role in this. And does it really come down to parents having candid conversations with their kids?
Yeah, to me it does, right? It's a combination of that and of, you know, of the kids just understanding what social media is like and what can happen there. And do these kids even need social media? If you're going to school every day and seeing all of your friends, you know, you're not really in that world yet where you need social media, whereas adults have different groups of friends living all over the place now from different places in our lives. And so we need that. So that's another part, just thinking about, you know, whether your kids even need social media yet, whether it enhances their life yet or not, because there are great things about social media, right? I mean, I connected with my the kid who used to live next door to me and moved away when I was in third grade. We're Facebook friends now. We comment on each other's stuff. I mean, this is wonderful things that happen because of social media. But I didn't need that when I was 13 years old.
Right.
And so, you know, what I've told my kids is, you know, we're not going to talk about social media until you're 13, because that's kind of the age that's currently put on it. But although I would welcome that age being raised. And I also recognize that people find ways to get on earlier than that, right? So I'm sure my kids are pretty smart. If they wanted to get on, they could probably find a way around those sorts of things. But we've talked about making sure that they are ready to be on social media, right? And so, like, what important things do I want them to know? And that's things like that social media is not real life. Social media represents the best of us. Yeah. You know,
or the worst. Well, in some ways.
It represents that's true. It represents the best and worst. But when we're picking out a photo to post, we might have taken. My family and I went to a holiday thing last night, and we took a selfie, and we took like 10 of them. Yeah. And then I picked the best one to post on social media, right? Yeah. So it's always going to be the kind of the best of you that's there. I want them to know things like that likes are a horrible way to measure our worth. I think likes made sense for these social networks, but don't make any sense for kids. Yeah. And then another big thing I want them to understand is just assume anything you post is public, right? That anything you type into the world or post into the world, even if you think it's private, it's not private. There's always the chance that goes beyond that.
So when you talked about, the great things related to social media, a number of things kind of came into my head. So I too am not to the point where my kids are in third grade. They are not on social media, but we're dipping our toe and inevitably edging into that digital landscape with them. I mean, they have an iPad. They don't have the run of the iPad. They can't just do anything they want with it. They have to ask permission. And a lot of it is to, they want to watch something on Netflix and Disney Plus, and that's great. I mean, every parent does this. It's, you hit the end of the day and you're done, and those things are inevitable. But I do remember this part of it in that last year during COVID, we had neighbors across the street. They had kids of similar age. We would kick our kids outside every single day, and they would be outside all day playing with each other. I mean, we just essentially, pandemicked together. Mm-hmm. And they were outside every single day. And unfortunately, that family had to move away due to a job opportunity. Tears, of course, from our kids. But they've been able to continue to connect because of the technology that we have today, and it's been absolutely wonderful. In fact, we had one of the kids stay with us for a weekend, and it was like they never skipped a beat because they were able to continue to connect, and it was great. But that's not always, the case. Like you said, you can get into it so far where you're essentially living in this digital world that isn't real life.
Yeah. There's no question, right? And obviously, we know there are bad things on the internet and bad actors and all those things. And so I think we just need to try to be as aware as we can of what our kids are doing and talking to them about every step of the way and making sure things are right for them. So, Instagram Kids is a good topic to discuss because we never saw this, but Facebook was working on a version of Instagram for kids. So we never knew what the features were, and and this for me was a tough one because on one side I was secretly rooting that this would happen and could be a safe introduction to social media for my kids without likes, without some of the things that cause problems. But at the same time, it's like, do I trust Mark Zuckerberg to make the right decisions when it comes to my kids? And no, I do not.
No. Well, it's interesting because I listened to an interview with him, and someone point blank asked him, their age is 13, and they asked him about, students being on their platforms, at age 10, 11, and his response wasn't, it is a concern that, we need to address. His response was, well, that can't happen because we have an age limit. It's like, come on, dude. Like, kids are on your platforms. And then as these Facebook papers came out, they prioritized the engagement on their platforms rather than the mental health well-being of not only adults but primarily kids as well.
Yeah, and you can't sugarcoat it. Mark Zuckerberg wants those kids on his platforms 100%. As early as they can be on so they can get hooked, right? Maybe Instagram Kids maybe was going to be the happy meal of social media, right? Our kids we drive by McDonald's and kids scream McDonald's because of the Happy Meals with a little toy. Yeah. And so it just kind of gets them hooked, and that's what they want, is to get them hooked young. And so, I taught a video workshop with middle school kids a couple of years ago, and there was a kid in there who had an Iowa Hawkeye shirt on. I was like, oh, great, you're going to go to Iowa? And he's like, no, I'm going to Iowa State. I went to a camp there for robotics, and I'm already signed up. He was like 10 years old. Yeah. Kids are very influential at a young age.
Yeah. It is really cool. So, we're a one-to-one district, technology district, which I think was really cutting edge, 7 years ago when we started doing it. I would imagine that there's a lot of school districts are that way now, but their skill set around the digital age and digital communication is really, really phenomenal. Like just what they're able to do. Like I was talking with some high school students just earlier this week about doing a podcast. Like they get it. They get how to do it. We talked through a number of really good things that I, encourage them to consider, but they get it.
Yeah, they understand technology. They can use. You hand a 3-year-old an iPad and he's going to figure something out on it.
So you've worked, a lot with undergrads, graduate students, and then, as you mentioned in our previous podcast, high school students as well. Do they have an understanding, in your opinion, that it's permanent, that things are permanent online? And I ask because you're in your teenage years, it's, whatever. We've all done things when we were teenagers. It's just, you and I grew up before social media, and there wasn't that same type of longevity to those mistakes as what they are now. And I would imagine that there's a lot of employers, they, in addition to a background check, probably do a digital footprint check of the people that they are looking to hire.
Yeah, and I think that they don't get it. And my best anecdote to explain that is a little bit old, but when students were leaving Facebook, because Facebook was originally for college students, so it held on a long time as attracting young people. But when they started leaving Facebook for Twitter, the reason that they were going from Facebook to Twitter that they told me, and this is multiple students in different classes saying the same thing, is said, we went from Facebook to Twitter because Twitter is more private. And I said, no. Facebook is actually the private one. Twitter is the public one. And they just didn't understand because in their mind, their parents weren't on Twitter, so that's what made it private. So they don't even see it through, I think, the holistic lens of what these apps are and how they work. They see it through their own life, and so they don't know those things.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, I get it. These are really adult conversations that need to be had with, 13-year-olds? I mean, I'm still under sort of, my opinion is that, a student graduates from high school, they don't need to know what they're going to do the rest of their life. They're 18 years old. If you want to go to college, great. If you have another job that you want to go to, great. And I hope that our district, help prepare those students for whatever's next, once they graduate, whatever that may be. But that doesn't mean that you're tied into that forever. And yet, some of these conversations need to be had with middle school students and who are even less equipped, necessarily to have that understanding, nor should they need to have that understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's hard. So, I think parents need to start talking to their kids about some of these social networks at an early age. I think about it, I used to always ask my nieces, who are older than my kids, what social networks are you guys using?
Yeah.
What are your friends using? Because I was curious to know, because that's kind of my job to know these things. And, thinking about it, I've never asked, my 10-year-old, are your friends on social media? Are they doing stuff there? And so, I need to start having that conversation with them, right? And it's kind of it's a little bit like the getting us into kind of the bad side of TikTok that we hear about, and so you hear there's this TikTok hoax or a TikTok challenge, to do something, bad at school, and you're like, well, do I ask my kids about this, or is me asking my kids about this going to be their first time they learn about this, and now they're going to go look for this thing? And so that's what's tough is to know what to talk to your kids about, and I guess as early as you can develop that relationship where you're discussing these things is important.
I think I really do think so. Those same questions were ones that we had as a district. Do we share this out and then raise more attention to it, or do we not? And so we did send something to parents. This is now probably a month and a half ago, and we got some positive feedback. Hey, thanks. It did actually kickstart conversations in our homes around those types of things. The parents were not aware of it at the time, and so they appreciated that, and so they could engage their students in those types of conversations. So tips for parents. Let's say we have a range of parents. I'm an elementary school age parent, but we have parents for our middle school students and even our high school students who some are already on social media platforms. It's tough. Once kids get into high school, you have to start that process of letting go a little bit. They're becoming adults, and you have to let them go. And they start driving cars, and you have to get them a phone, and that inevitably is going to lead, at least for this conversation, them to being on social media. So, how do you manage this?
Yeah. So I think the communicating with your kids is important. I think that trying to understand these social networks is important. I tell everybody, download TikTok and you're right into it. You don't have to go follow anyone. You're right there, and you'll start to get a sense of what it's like. Just understand it. You don't have to create content there, but understand these social networks so you can talk to your kids about them in the right ways, and and understand that at some point, they need the freedom to be let go and go explore these things and use them. And hopefully you've done enough with them that you trust that they're going to do a good job on it.
Yeah.
I feel like my 10-year-old is going to be fine when the time comes that he can be on social media because he's a thoughtful, smart kid, and we talk openly about things. And then you've got to decide whether some parents are like, we collect the phones at night. Some parents are, you got to give kids a little bit of latitude to to make their own mistakes. So it's tough. It's not something I'm looking forward to.
Well, I'm going to connect with you in a couple of years. You can let me know how it goes, and then you can give me some really some more active tips. I feel like over the course of these 2 episodes, maybe me in particular, I rag a lot on social media. Is it good? Is it? Well, there is good to it. There are challenges with it, and it's going to continue to evolve. The way that Facebook started it to the way it is now, it's changed a lot, and it's really impacted our world in a grand way. But in some ways, aren't we just in the infancy of this social media? I mean, it certainly isn't going away, and having the skills and understanding of how to manage today's social media can be beneficial moving forward. I mean, jobs. I mean, literal jobs are created around these platforms. And having that understanding can be incredibly powerful for students now who eventually will be adults and working, in years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I rely on these students who understand how to use TikTok appropriately and can do that for, both our school brand, and then they can help them get jobs with other brands that need someone who is younger and can understands how to use how these networks are used, and then how to craft the message for the brand that goes with that. So there's a lot of power in understanding these social networks. And you're right. I mean, they're very much in the infancy, and I think that it's good that the Facebook files kind of brought us back to thinking about the mental well-being of people.
Yeah.
And so I think I see a lot of stuff coming out from these. And I mean, these social networks can launch things fast. I mean, they have they have lots of people, powerful teams. They can do things really fast. So they're addressing that. I saw a great post from TikTok yesterday addressing the challenges.
Okay.
That was really interesting. So they did some research to figure out what sort of things young people think is risky, and so things that we think is risky, they don't yet think is risky, and so that's part of it. Is they don't necessarily see these things as risky, and that to me is an educational opportunity. I mean, the good news is you got them in school for 7 hours a day.
Yeah,
we can be teaching them some things.
Yeah,
but kind of understanding, how risky some things are, how bad some things are for them to do, can start to make a difference in what they do and don't do.
Yeah. So I know that you're having these conversations with college-age students. Are you aware of, is this becoming more ingrained in public schools now? We don't have it in a robust way, but I've talked with high school students about gauging their interest on, doing some social media on our behalf as a district, or their particular school as a district. These are probably things that we should start bringing to the forefront. I've gathered that there are some students, high school students, they get the difference between personal social media and things you can and can't do, and operating on behalf of an entity, whatever that entity is. It could be a small organization, could be a large organization. Those are 2 different things.
Yeah, and so I taught a high school workshop last week, and so whenever I teach, whenever I can be around high school students, I want to talk to them about social media, and so I asked the question. I said, if you could only pick 3 social networks to have at your high school, what would those 3 be? You want to take a guess at what it was when it was 3?
Students are answering this?
High school students.
Probably Snap and TikTok and YouTube.
And YouTube was on the list, but that wasn't one. So it was Snapchat, it was TikTok, and it was Instagram.
Okay.
So those
yeah,
three.
Sure. Yep.
So then I said, now if you can only have two, then any guesses what it
Snap and TikTok.
So TikTok was chosen by everyone.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of split between Instagram and Snapchat.
Yep.
And then the surprise was when I said you could only have one, it wasn't TikTok.
Oh, okay.
It became Instagram. So it's kind of clear. Instagram number one, TikTok number two, and Snapchat, number three. But to me, that says if you are trying to reach high school, and this is what I told them. I said, okay, so these were journalism students who have a yearbook, have a newspaper publication, and they're trying to reach high school students. So I said, if you're trying to reach high school students, you need to be number one, using Instagram to do it, number two, using TikTok to do it, and then number three, considering Snapchat, because they consider Snapchat more of a messaging app, and so they weren't using it in any way. But I said, maybe we need to figure out how could we use Snapchat if that's where they are, if we meet them where they are.
Well, that is how I think about it, too. In some ways, we're not on Snapchat or TikTok, but, the Facebook is for everyone. It's for the moms, dads, the grandpas and grandmas. I see Instagram, and we do a lot of cross posting, but Instagram is for our students a lot. I've seen a growth just anecdotally in our Instagram account, and a lot of them are students because that's where they live, and they're interested. Sometimes they're interested in what we have to say, but at least they follow our account. It's a lot more adult-centered content than student-centered content, but it impacts their world, and so I think that's why they follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, and here's the other thing that is of an interest to you. See if this has popped up in your world yet. So these are students from all over the country, different high schools, and they all mentioned that at their school there were just like funny Instagram accounts run by students about something. So it's there's one was like is just like. And they all like have the same name, but then the school name. So one was just like photos of people sleeping at school, right? And there's a bad parking one at the school, right? And so they're. And what that speaks to me is that a lot of these teenagers are on Instagram, but they're afraid to post to their own Instagram because of the, maybe the pressures of being perfect on there. So they'd rather have run these other accounts where there's no pressure to do anything right or wrong, and it can just be horrible photos.
It's anonymous, essentially.
Yeah, so they need these outlets to share some things. But maybe they're smart enough to realize that they're not quite ready to have everything associated with their name and profile on Instagram.
Well, maybe that's smart in some ways. Then it does. Some of those accounts do eat up pockets of my week from time to time. So I don't know that I have always a strongly positive opinion about them. But again, listen, I get it. It's the reality of the world in which we live in now. And so we really just have to, continue to take efforts to reach and engage with our students. And that comes from us as a district, with our teachers, our building administrators, and then parents as well. Well, we've hit our time. We've done 2 of them. Chris, I want to thank you so much for being on both of these episodes of the Amazing Education Podcast.
Thank you.